The match of the year is over, but not the way we expected it to be. So many crazy events happened today. Let me walk you through it because you are not gonna believe what just happened. Now, we have started the day with 1 point advantage for Vladimir Kramnik. Kramnik starts the first game, he plays as white, the position is completely normal. I mean, they are playing pretty much the same opening throughout the whole match, both as white and as black. When Kramnik plays as white, it's always the Catalan opening. When Jospem plays as white, it's always the French defense from Kramnik, so it's all the same. But here, the position is around equal, and something completely crazy is happening. White is playing rook to c7 with a clear intention. There is just one threat out of this move, knight to e6 with the fork, and you cannot really take with the rook because pawn takes, and you're just losing an exchange. There is absolutely no compensation for it. But it's even worse than that. Not only Jospem misses the move knight to e6, he also plays rook to f5, and even the rook is not protecting the e6 square. And now Kramnik just plays knight to e6 with a check, winning the game on the spot. Jospem resigns, there is nothing to handle. So now we have 2 points advantage for Kramnik. The second game was nearly perfect. I mean, 98% accuracy from both of the players, and well, White had some pressure, but then Kramnik managed to equalize, and here we have a completely normal position. You can play basically whatever you want as black. You have knight to e2 check, they simply at the end just move the rook somewhere, but for some reason Kramnik plays d3, just sacrificing that pawn, and that was the only chance for White here. Jospem had to find this amazing idea. I have to say it's not simple at all, but this is the only chance if you want to win the game. You have to play king to c3, and this is exactly what he did. Then you have to play king to b2, and this is exactly what he played. Well, there are a lot of discover checks, but it's pointless because, well, there are no ideas for black to win anything with a discover check. So after knight d4, all you need to do is escape with the king. So go to a3, and then if you continue giving some checks, just escape all the way to a4. Now you're a pawn up, and you have pretty decent chances. The engine says the advantage is not that big, but I would say in a time scramble, that is a very good chance for White, because you have this weakness on a7, you have this knight on c2, which is at the same time active, but if you imagine this king coming to here, then the knight will have difficult times to get to there, provided this pawn is going to be protected. So there are chances for White to win it. But unfortunately for Jospem, he played, instead of king to a3, just king to b1 back, and with such a passive king, he never had any chances to win the position anymore. It ended up being this position where black is a pawn down, but the king is extremely active, whereas this one is cut off, no chances to fight at all, and after rook to b6, soon this b pawn got lost, and then it's rook against rook, draw. Starting from game number 3, something crazy begins to happen. So Kramnik has a huge advantage here as white, and after move knight to c6, all he needs to do is somehow try to stabilize. Yes, the pawn on a5 is hanging, but meanwhile you have so many opportunities. You can either just play knight b7, make sure you protect the pawn, and well, then you attack the pawn on d5, then you can attack the knight, and this pawn is so strong. Or, and what is even stronger for white, you can protect the pawn tactically. You can play here knight to e6, similarly you attack the bishop, but it's not like that. After knight to a7, the knight jumps all the way to c7, attacking the rook, and amazingly it has absolutely 0 squares and you lose your knight. So here you see that all of the pieces are active, the pawn on d5 is about to be lost, that a pawn is a passer, d pawn is a passer. I mean, this is completely winning for white. Instead, what happened? Kramnik immediately took here on d5, and then Jospem immediately takes the pawn on f5 back, and then there is no real chance. Yes, you still have this passer over here, but it's 3 against 3, and you're not gonna believe it, but Jospem ended up winning this game as black because, well, it's time trouble for both of the players, just 5 seconds on the clock, and this c-pawn is a bit loose. I mean, it's always hanging. Both players missed it so many times. It was hanging there on c6, but for some reason both of them didn't really take it. Anyway, that was drawish, and finally the pawn on c6 is taken. Now it's 3 against 2. The engine doesn't care. It says it's draw no matter what you do. But all of the chess players understand that from a practical point of view, it's so difficult, especially without any time on the clock, to hold such a position as white, because you're 1 pawn down, there are like million moves, million tries Black can try here to win the game. For example, rook d4 just blunders the rook in one move, but Black didn't do it, playing rook to a5, something so crazy happened, but eventually Jospem just converted his advantage here. When it already felt like white stabilizes the position, rook d4, very difficult move. I mean, for me, almost not possible to find it, but Kramnik did. But after rook f3, you need to find the only move, king to e2, and then the king remains to be active. Instead, what has been played is king to e1, that loses on the spot because the second pawn is gone, and then there is no chance to recover. The rook's endgame is completely lost here, thanks to the bridge maneuver, and you see that without any difficulties Black managed to win here. Even the bridge wasn't needed because the h-file is under control, the king comes away and the pawn promotes. And now it's just 1 point advantage for Kramnik. The next game is even more crazy. Kramnik completely outplayed his opponent as Black. I mean, he has 2 points, just straight up 2 extra points. They are connected passers. All you need to do is to play knight to e6. No, you are not losing the knight because, well, the bishop is hanging. And of course, I mean, Kramnik is a world champion. He understands that. Otherwise, if you don't exchange, then this knight is coming to d4. This is so strong. There is absolutely no chance to lose this position. But you imagine Kramnik did just that. He is making something absolutely crazy. Instead of playing this normal move, knight to e6, and either activate his knight or just exchange and get a very simple endgame with 2 extra pawns, I have no doubt he would have won it. He plays rook takes g2, just voluntarily giving up the exchange for absolutely nothing. Like, why on earth would you do that? And he still has some chances. I mean, the position is immediately better for white, but practically speaking, with 3 seconds on the clock, there is no chance you are gonna save this position against such a blitz monster as Jospem. I mean, the game continued, and even Black had some chances here, but practically speaking, it's almost impossible. I knew instantly, well, Jospem is gonna win this because so many weaknesses, the king is so active, and it doesn't matter how many pawns you have, sooner or later, all of them are gonna fall apart. Though there was a chance here with knight to e5 check, so the pawn on c4 is under attack, and now Kramnik makes yet another blunder. He just plays h3, and afterwards there is no chance for Black, just bishop takes h3. Instead, he had this amazing move knight to d3, which is absolutely not that simple to find, but thank God rook e3 doesn't work, because a2 and actually now Black is winning here. So the bishop is under attack, and yes, you might ask, why can't I just take it? That's a free pawn standing there. But unfortunately, there is knight f4 fork, so it's a double threat here. The knight on d3 is so powerful. That was a tactical chance for Kramnik. He had 10 seconds on the clock, but of course, with so many opportunities, I mean, this is really difficult to find. Afterwards, there was no chances anymore. Jospem just converted his advantage into a full point. And now, for the first time in a very long time, the score is equal. At this point, something insane started to happen. Instead of just focusing on the game, and I would argue that is the best thing when you play such a match, Vladimir Kramnik started to argue with the arbiters that he experiences a lot of lags on the chess.com server, that somehow the time of the moves doesn't add up with overall time of the game. He even brought up a calculator and started to calculate all of the time spent per all of the moves and whether it adds up or not. After the match, Kramnik said in the interview that they calculated those moves and it appeared to be like around 30 seconds difference between the time they actually used the stopwatch to calculate the entire duration of the game and the amount of seconds spent for all of the moves added, and it just doesn't add up according to the Kramnik. I'm not sure whether it's true or not, but he claims that's what the arbiters confirmed as well. If that's the truth, then it's just crazy. I mean, how on earth would it be possible? Kramnik says it might be a hacking attack or something like that. But anyway, that influenced his mind a lot during the games, and it was so evident. He was arguing after pretty much every single game that something is not correct there with the clock. And And the highlight was the very last game when something absolutely crazy happened. Imagine how cool it would be to play chess without ever having opening troubles again. What if I told you I could teach you all openings you will ever need in just 10 days? You get lifetime access to more than 110 pure value video tutorials, almost 100 practical tasks to apply your knowledge immediately into practice, 30 plus bonus videos to dive 10 times deeper, as well as private community where all questions you might ever have are answered daily. Get the $200 limited time discount with the link in the description and forget about all opening pain once and for all. This next game is a huge exception of the entire match, because so far we have seen the normal scenario you expect from such a match. Kramnik is better prepared in the openings, he gets better positions, and in general, well, Jospem himself admitted Kramnik is a better chess player, so he gets better positions, there are better chances to win the games. But in the end, it all comes down to time trouble, where Jospem is so much stronger and so he won so many of those time scrambles. But here, Jospem just outplayed Kramnik from start to finish as black in the Catalan opening, with one exception. There was this incredible move. So Jose makes a mistake here. He plays knight to a8, which is a very passive move, and the knight is completely not participating in the game, and there is an incredible resource white has at this point. Feel free to pause the video for a second and find it. I guarantee it's worth it. That would have been the most brilliant move of the match by far. So knight takes d5. Can you imagine that? You're just sacrificing the knight for this central pawn. Why? Because after takes, you sacrifice yet another pawn. You play e6 check, and there is nothing you can take it with. Because if you take with the king, then we are just taking on c6 and the entire position collapses. And once again, the fact that this knight is there in the corner plays a huge role. And if you take with the pawn, then we continue sacrificing. We have already sacrificed the knight, then the pawn, and now the rook comes next. Rook takes c6, and then finally we get the material back with knight to e5 check, then rook takes, and this position is entirely winning for white. Can you imagine such a combination? Unfortunately for Kramnik, he didn't see it, and instead he got himself into a huge problem, because now suddenly black has all of the pieces active. This g5 pawn is practically impossible to take back, so black has an extra pawn and a better pieces placement. This knight is coming to c4. I mean, everything works out for black, and that was the result of the game. Black won it without every trouble, and I was literally surprised by how strong Jose played this exact game. He just outplayed. I mean, if we removed that exception of the knight d5, absolutely brilliant idea, which wasn't found. Otherwise, black just outplayed completely from start to finish here, both positionally and tactically. White, this a2 move, brilliant. In the end of the day, decides the destiny of the game, because a1 is coming, rook takes, c2 is coming. I mean, everything is just falls apart for white. You cannot protect anything. And now bishop takes a1. Finally, Kramnik resigns, and for the first time in 17 games, Jose Martinez leads in the match. After this and Kramnik continuing to argue instead of focusing on the game, I thought, okay, from now on, Kramnik is gonna lose pretty much every single game in a row, because, well, that's normally what I do. If I start to lose, I keep losing and losing game after game. But this is not what happens, to my surprise. So here, Jospem, out of, I don't know how you get to this idea, he just sacrificed an exchange positionally, and it turned out to be a very cool idea, except for this tactical problem here. You can just take here with the knight as black, and then the bishop on b5 is hanging. If you take the bishop here, then the king protects the knight, and if you take the knight first, then the bishop on b5 is hanging. Either way, it just doesn't work for white at all. But Kramnik believed him, and he played here just king takes e7, which leads to this position where black has an extra exchange. But white has such a piece domination here. Both of the knights are controlling all of those squares. Black practically has literally no moves. And I thought, okay, no chances black can survive it. But step by step, black somehow managed to remaneuver the pieces. And that was an important moment here when white played the move a5. Because seemingly you control so much space, you stop this knight from coming to c4, but the knight is coming to b5 now. And somehow when the pieces are getting off the board, black gets this initiative. The c2 pawn, the c file is getting opened, and the initiative is exactly what black needs. I mean, you have the rooks, you would like to open up the files, and that costed black a pawn, but now he has a much better position. And this is exactly what happened after some mistakes from both sides. Rook g6 was actually a very nice idea from white, and now all you need to do is play rook to d6, attack this vulnerable pawn on d5, and then white is back into the game. But instead, Jose played rook to a6, attacking the a7 pawn, which also seems reasonable. But then he played f6, which really gave too much for black, and then you have a huge initiative here at some point. e4 was a huge opportunity, creating a buzzer with a check. I mean, that would be crazy. But instead, Kramnik got his rook activated, and then he played rook d6, which seemed, I mean, the computer doesn't like it, but from a human perspective, it's a very instructive moment for us to learn. When you have an extra exchange, try to exchange a pair of rooks. That would make your task much simpler, and that is exactly what happened, because then the second rook gets activated and it gets to the h2 pawn, and then this pawn decides the destiny of the game. Yes, white also has a passer, but this rook comes to g8 in the very last moment, and that is enough because h2 pawn is unstoppable. Kramnik comes back, and now it's 10-10. The score is equal again. In the next game, Jose has black pieces. And here, black is in total control, there is an extra pawn, but the problem is the position is deadly draw. Like, if you're playing the classical chess, you have a little bit of time to calculate the lines, there is no chance you're gonna lose the game as white here if you are a strong grandmaster. But of course, with 4 seconds on the clock, the task is much more difficult, and here is the key moment. Jospem plays rook to g2 check, and the king has to decide where would you go, and Kramnik blunders here. He plays king to h1, and that is game over immediately because of this idea rook to e2. Now you cannot take it because then the pawn promotes, and if you don't take it, then checkmate is coming if you're going away. Kramnik plays rook to f8 check, gives another check, and plays rook to e4. You cannot take it because of the stalemate, but unfortunately there is a simple rook to e1 check. You just force the rook straight, and then f2, f1, game over with the checkmate. Instead though, if you play king to f1, you sacrifice another pawn, but then you are giving those checks forever, and because this rook on h2 is very misplaced, you are saving the game. So now leading 1 point, Jose has another chance to win the game. He plays here rook takes c6 after Kramnik made a mistake with queen to e7. Then black takes on b4, and seems like the entire material is equal, but it's all about the king's safety. And now black king is in trouble because instead of rook e6, that was a mistake. Rook c8 is the right move with the check, you must take it, but then queen takes, and that's a check, and if you go to h7, then just bishop c3, threatening a checkmate, and the knight is still hanging, so you cannot really play queen to e8, that would be an extra piece in the endgame. If instead of taking the rook on c8, you just play king to h7, because notice this queen is hanging on c2. There is an amazing move, which is the reason why Jospem missed it, queen to b2. Now the rook is hanging on b8, but queen to h8 is a checkmate threat in one, and there is no way to save everything. Yes, you can exchange a pair of rooks, but then the knight is hanging and the checkmate is hanging, so white just wins. Instead though, white played here rook takes e6, and that made task much simpler for black. And then the real problem happened here for white, because still the position is overwhelmingly better. With seconds on the clock, just 3 seconds for Kramnik, I thought no chances he's gonna save it. But for some reason, Jose decided to exchange the queens, and this is the dream for black, because suddenly, instead of being checkmated like at any given point, you're coming into the endgame where, of course, Kramnik has a huge technique, and it's only 1 pawn deficit with the knight against the bishop on one side of the board. There are very good chances to make a draw, and this is exactly what happened. It was quite difficult, but somehow Kramnik handled all of the threats with little time on the clock, and this king is far away. That made it much simpler. So in the end of the day, they just repeated the moves here with bishop d2 and rook d3, and the game ended in a draw. With 6 games to go, Jose Martinez has a 1-point advantage. This game, it feels super complicated. Like, Kramnik plays as white, his position is entirely winning. According to the engine, it's +4. But finding this victory, it's so hard. I mean, the only move, Black just played bishop takes a3, there was a pawn on a3, he took the pawn, now the rook is hanging, and Kramnik just played rook to f1, which spoils the entire advantage, and now in fact it's much simpler to play as Black. The right move, though, the completely winning line, is queen to h5, just sacrificing that rook completely. Because then, no, you don't even take the h6 pawn. That would be completely blundering the entire advantage, because now there is an amazing line, queen takes d4, and you cannot take it back, because the queen is hanging on h6. I mean, this is so crazy for a blitz game. And Kramnik had 1 minute at this point, and Jospem just 12 seconds on the clock. So the right move, the winning one, was knights to e5 here, just opening up the road for this queen to come, and then with the help of 2 knights, somehow it's just checkmate. There is no way to deal with it, even though Black has an entire extra rook. Later on, Jospem was in the driver's seat, but somehow Kramnik managed, with a few seconds on the clock, still maintain the equal position towards the end, and something crazy happened. Like here, the huge threat is queen takes f1, king takes, and then rook d1, if you play something like king to g2, for example. Just take it here, king takes, rook d1 check, king goes away, and there is a8, Black has an extra rook, the game is over. But White has this amazing resource to save the game, queen to a8. And now if you try to do the same thing, you can still play it. But it turns out White escapes here. You need to go not to g2, but to e2. This is so complicated. Now a1 queen, and there is queen f8 check. And if you go to g8, there is this check, and the key thing is the rook is under attack, so that when you block the check, I just exchange and take the rook. And if you go to e5, then I continue checking you, there is queen to h8, and somehow there is no way for the king escape, because on the d file, I'm just taking here the rook, and once again, that is completely fine for White. In the game, though, for some impossible to explain reason, in this very position, Kramnik played king to h2, just leaving the rook completely unprotected. My guess is the whole thing around the games, the chess.com lags, just got into his mind, and he stopped playing normally, thinking normally, and so he just blundered the rook here and immediately resigned. The very next game, Jospem has a completely winning position for White for pretty much the entire game, and here he has this passer along the c-file. All he needs to do is to play rook to d7, but he's afraid of doing that. It's just 4 seconds on the clock. It's pretty understandable, because it allows this back rank check, and then the bishop has to go back. But the problem is, Black is just completely lost here, because if you play queen to f4 and try to be active, then this pawn just promotes. And otherwise, well, queen takes f7 is coming, you can't go to e5, there is just nothing you can do here. But with 4 seconds on the clock, instead of playing rook to d7, Jospem plays queen to e3, which is very unfortunately for him a 3 moves repetition, and that's a draw, because they were shuffling the pieces back and forth, and so he's spoiling such a huge chance to win another game. The next game, surprisingly enough, after all of this action going on, was just perfect. Both of the players had nearly perfect accuracy, as well as 3,350 level of play according to chess.com, and it ended up with this move repetition and a draw. This is like the highest quality game of the entire match, and even though all of that is happening so tough for both of the players to handle, I was so amazed by the class of this game. At this point, Jospem needs just one more victory to secure the win in the match, because he has currently 13.5 points and you need 14.5 to win. And he just beat Kramnik without any chances in this game, just outplayed him both strategically, positionally, and tactically. So here, the key moment of the game, queen takes b3, that was Kramnik's idea, just to try to at least shake the balance, because look at all of his pieces. They are so passive there on the back ranks. I mean, absolutely no ideas, no activity, but queen takes b3 just doesn't work at all because of bishop c6. Now, it's even not the best move, but it's good enough because it's attacking the rook. All of the pieces are under attack there. Bishop to d6, but now bishop comes to d5 back, and that's a double attack. The queen is under attack, and queen takes f7 with checkmate coming. absolutely no defense against it. So Kramnik decided to sacrifice the queen, but it didn't help because in a few moves, it's just so passive pieces. You cannot do anything about it, and Kramnik had to resign, losing the match. There were still 2 games to play though, but the match didn't end well, because in this second to last game, Kramnik is playing as white. He has a completely winning position. He has bishop and knight for the rook. In addition to that, he has 2 connected passers over here, A and B. Absolutely 0 chances for black to hold. But something crazy happens. He has like 30 seconds on the clock, and Jospem just played queen to A5. But Kramnik didn't receive this move on his end, on his computer, and so he just lost on time. And that was the result of the game. And Kramnik said, I am done, I cannot play anymore, because he was already arguing about all of the lags happening on chess.com, but this was just too much to handle for him, because the position is completely winning. Instead of winning it, he gets a loss on time and just 0 chances to fight. So that concludes our match. Even though there is 1 more round to go, Kramnik decides, well, he cannot continue like that, and he was so sad in the after-match interview, not with the result he got, but with the circumstances, with all of the lags he gets. He said, it's just not possible to play for me, and I wanted to make this experiment to test the Martinez. He said, by the way, he has 0 issues with the Jospem himself. He seems like a very nice guy, according to Kramnik, and no problems with him, but he is so angry at chess.com. It's so clear that all of the problems, according to him, somehow happen only to him. And so that was so crazy. That concludes our match of the year. What are your thoughts? What you think is gonna happen now? Because the match was actually to test the Jospem, whether he can perform over the board as well as online, but with all of the guys watching at him, the same result as he does on Title Tuesday pretty much every week. Now, he has won the match. He has won 14.5 to 11.5 if you don't count the last game, which would be weird to count, but he still won. What do you make of it? Does it prove that he is not a cheater? Or would you say that he should have won with a much bigger margin? Let me know your opinion in the comments. In case you have missed the second day of the tournament, it was so exciting, definitely take a look here.